So in the easiest possible terms for laymen, what's that of climate change? What is happening in the planet?
Yeah. The simple science of climate change is that carbon dioxide is a heat-trapping gas. And for the last 100 years, we've been burning coal in our power plants and gasoline in our vehicles, our cars. And in the process, we've been releasing billions of tons of carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide is encircling the globe. It's a heat-trapping gas, and it's forming a blanket that's surrounding the Earth. And so the very simple science of global warming is that that blanket is getting thicker, and a thicker blanket means a warmer planet.
What's the result of this?
Well, the result of this increased heat-trapping gas, this blanket around the planet, is that it's warming. And it's warmed about almost half a degree or more centigrade over the last 100 years. And the business as usual forecast is that during the lifetime of children in school today, the planet is likely to warm another 4.5 degrees centigrade. And to put that number in perspective, during the last ice age, a period of time during which much of the Earth was covered by hundreds of meters of ice, the world was only 4.5 degrees centigrade colder than it is right now. So our children are looking at the very real possibility of a swing in global temperatures of ice age magnitude only in the opposite direction within their lifetimes, depending upon what we do in the next decade or so.
So what will happen?
The consequences of a rapidly heating planet are dramatic. And so we will see rising sea levels between 0.5 meter and 2 meters, probably this century. We will see more intense floods and droughts, more extreme temperatures and extreme weather events. We will see challenges to agriculture and food supply, more forest fires, increased forest fires, increased spread of pests and diseases. So very large-scale changes, again, that get worse the hotter it gets.
Are we already in a huge catastrophic change, or we are foreseeing it in the future?
Well, regardless of our behavior, if we stop burning all fossil fuels today, the planet would still warm another 0.5 degree to 1 degree centigrade. But it is in our hands to determine how hot it's going to get. If the planet warms up, say 2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade, that will present challenges for our children. But it will still be a recognizable world. There's a well-known economist named Martin Weinstein at Harvard who said that when we push into the business as usual scenario, doing nothing to slow down our emissions of 4.5 degrees centigrade, he says that will take us into a terra incognita biosphere. It's a world that we just really wouldn't recognize in terms of the ecological impacts. So we are headed potentially towards a grand catastrophe, but certainly we have the ability, it's not really an economic or a technical challenge. We could stabilize and begin to cut our emissions sufficient to hold the temperature increase to, say, 2 degrees centigrade. And that would be a challenging but manageable scenario.
Would many life forms actually disappear?
Yes. Yes, global warming is a severe threat to biodiversity. By the end of the century, it will be the primary driver of extinction. And again, it depends on our actions today. If we push into the 4.5 degree centigrade warming scenarios, then the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has suggested that we could be looking at extinction rates on the order of 50 to 70% of all of the species on the planet going extinct solely as a function of habitat destruction from global warming. Obviously, we need to not go there, and if we hold warming to the low end, 2 degrees centigrade or so, we are looking at large-scale extinctions, but not of biblical proportions.
So the obvious question that can follow is, well, there have been meetings and gatherings, but it seems that the United States don't quite support these efforts.
Yes. In the next decade, there are 2 players who have to get on board with the global effort, the United States and China. Now, because we are roughly, each country contributes 22 to 23% of global warming pollution. In the United States, we have faced a very well-funded campaign by the fossil fuel industries to confuse the public in terms of the actuality of global warming, in spite of the fact that the scientific community is unanimous in their belief that climate change is real and happening now. Scientific body after scientific body reporting this. The American media has portrayed the story as a he said, she said kind of story in which the weight of the industry-funded skeptics is given equal balance to 99% of the scientific community. That combined with the fact that we are fossil fuel addicts and we don't want to hear the bad news has led to political stalemate in the United States. And of course, our system of government is designed for stalemate, so it requires a supermajority to take action. So a well-organized minority is blocking change in the United States. It's possible that the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico may provide the impetus this year to see U.S. action.
Trying to change a little bit the scope of the talk, we would ask you to try to link in the relationship between country and cities linked with climate change. What do you think of this relationship?
Climate change is going to enhance the environmental stresses that already exist because of population growth and people seeking higher and higher levels of affluence and consumption. These are dynamics happening all over the world. By impacting water supplies, by increasing sea level, by accelerating forest fires, climate change is going to add additional stress to the resource challenges that we already face. This means that finding sustainable production methods that relink countryside with the urban and improve local economies and resilience are going to be even more important. So as we work to help people in the countryside stay in the countryside and maintain productive economies centered around agriculture and strengthen the economic relationships between the city and the countryside to improve the health of the regional or local economies, that's going to be increasingly important for protecting ourselves against the climate extremes that we're going to be experiencing.
So what can we do? and taking some of your own words, what can we do from the realm of politics, from the realm of passion? What can we do?
We're living at an extraordinary moment in human history, in the sense that the decisions that we're going to make politically and socially over the next decade are going to have profound impacts, not only on our own lives and the lives of our children, but in fact for every human being who's ever going to walk the face of the planet from now until the end of time. None of us can forecast the future, but we know that our efforts to politically to pass laws that support a rapid transition away from fossil fuels, and socially in terms of the education that we do and the changes that we make in the way we're living our own lives, all of those things, if they create a global movement in that direction, will have profound impacts on the future. So it's a very exciting and very human time to be alive, because by engaging politically and socially now, we have the chance to radically change the future, I think, in a way that no human generation has ever had. Just if I can say one more thing about that, okay. I turned 50 this year, 2 months ago, and I teach students who are 20 years old. By the time they turn 50, it will be roughly the year 2040. Between now and then, they have to rewire the entire planet with clean energy technologies, redesign every city on Earth, reimagine the global food system. Doing all that can provide the foundation for a truly just and sustainable world. Failure to do that is really unimaginable. So today's young people have a truly historic opportunity to rethink our relationship with the Earth and truly save the planet.
Is it a technical issue?
Yeah. Taking the first steps to stop global warming, and that involves globally capping and cutting emissions, that is not a technical or economic problem. The work that needs to be done for the next 15 or 20 years, we know how to do it. We have the technology. It won't cost that much. I mean, it's really a question of political will. Now, making that second generation of cuts, so in other words, we can cut 10 to 15 to 20% easily. But getting to the 80 or 90%, that will require technological innovation, investment in new technologies. But we have time. We have 15 or 20 years to make those fundamental investments. If we start now, if we start today, we can drive down the costs of solar, of cellulosic ethanol, and the technologies that we know about, and that would allow our children to get that next 30 or 40 or 50%. So it's not really a technical or economic problem. It's fundamentally a question of political will.
One of the mottos of the Oaxacan Forum is we have to recover the respect for water, or towards water. What do you think of this? This is something that has anything to do with climate change?
Yes. Respect for water I think will reemerge globally as people begin to come to grips with climate change. I think we all take water for granted. Many of us don't even know where it comes from. And as global warming begins to cause more extreme weather events, more heavy rainfall, more deluges, more droughts at the same time, I think we will see a growing global awareness of water. And something that I learned from coming to Oaxaca is the concept of slow water. I've never heard that before, and I think that's a very key idea. And I think that people will come to increasingly appreciate the importance of slow water in a world a warming world that will accelerate trends towards a fast water natural environment.
One of the policies that we are trying to enhance in the Oaxacan Forum is also the idea that water is both limited and sacred. What do you think of that?
I believe that water is limited and sacred. And I think we've had a rather dramatic illustration of that in this past month with this massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. A vast body of water. And yet we have images of this vast body of water just on the surface, coated with oil that is hundreds of miles long. And then recently images of divers who went into the water and observed huge clouds of oil mixed with the water. And I think that those images offend us at some level, all of us, because we believe that that water should be pure. So I believe as well that in the 21st century, as people bump up against the limits of water and something as basic as water, that there will be a reemergence of the sacredness of that resource going forward.
So the question was, what can we share with those who are trying to rethink our relationship with water?
I think from my visit to Oaxaca and an understanding of what the Water Forum is doing here, I think it's really unique in the world and also pioneering a path that many of us will be traveling down in the future. You live in an area where you've had to come to grips with lack of clean water, and you've done it in a very interesting way by engaging stakeholders from throughout the region to sit down and rethink water, rethink your relationship to water, and begin to pioneer new ways of meeting people's needs where they are and relying on the water that comes into the watershed instead of seeking water elsewhere. And I think that kind of localization of water supply and understanding of water sources and working collectively to solve problems is an important model for the rest of the world.
Final comment in this brief but interesting conversation.
I work with students who are studying the environment, and in many ways I think we've moved beyond the environment as a category, because whether we're dealing with water or with climate change, it's clear now that the two spheres are not separate. There's no such thing on the one hand as nature and society on the other. That really, when we are trying to address the resource limitations that we're facing, and whether that is the water on the one hand, or a place to dump our carbon dioxide in the atmosphere on the other, we have to recognize that there's a social relationship between humans and those resources, and that we can't just wall them off, that we have to figure out ways to allow people to productively use those resources in their lives while still recognizing the limits and working creatively within those limits to improve society in the process.